Hi, welcome to this video shiur from the Freehoff Institute of Progressive Halacha. We're going to be learning Bavli Psachim 99b. That's Talmud Psachim Daf Tzadi Tet Amud Bet. And we're going to be learning it from the traditional printed daf, the Tzurat HaDaf that is traditionally studied, largely because we'll be able to see how this page is formatted geographically almost, in a way that allows us to have a view of the commentaries as well as the text all at the same time. Just a little bit of, speaking of geography, a little bit of a tour around the page. On page 99b, up here in the top right-hand corner, we see the number Tzadi Tet with a colon. That means page 99. And the colon, it means side B, the obverse side of the page. The chapter name, Arvei Psachim, is Perek Asiri, the 10th chapter of Tractate Psachim. Arvei Psachim means the evenings of the eves of Pesach, that is, the day before the festival of Pesach. We sometimes think of Erev Pesach as the night of Pesach when we have the Seder. That's really not accurate. Erev Pesach is the day before Passover. It is the 14th of Nisan. It begins at sundown the day before the Seder, and it lasts until sundown 24 hours later. And at nightfall, that's the 15th of Nisan when we have the Seder itself. So Erev Pesachim is, or Erev Pesach as we call it, is really the day leading up to the Seder, in which we're engaged in all kinds of preparations. And our chapter here is going to focus on the preparations for the Seder itself. We're going to be looking primarily at the Mishnah and its commentaries, because there's an awful lot of stuff here, an awful lot of substance that we can concentrate on, even without getting into the Talmud or the Gemara. One thing to look at here that's especially noteworthy is over here in the highlighted section. Normally, on a page of Gemara, we have the commentary of Rashi, which would be on the inside margin of the page. If you imagine this is an actual book, this is the margin closest to the spine of the book. On the outside margin, we have the Tosafot, the commentaries of the sages of northern France and Germany, or Ashkenaz, of the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries. In the case of chapter 10 of Psachim, we have an additional commentary. It is the commentary, as the highlighted section says, Perush Rabbeinu Shmuel Talmid Rashi, Zichrono Livracha, the commentary of Rabbi Shmuel, the student of Rashi. This Rabbi Shmuel is not only Rashi's student, he is the son, he's the grandson of Rashi. He is the Rashbam, Shmuel ben Meir, who himself was one of the Balei HaTosafot, one of the people who was one of the sages of the school whose comments are digested on the other side of the page. Now, why do we have Rashbam here? We know that Rashi, up here in the top part of the left-hand margin, we know that Rashi is the major commentator to the Talmud Bavli. And we have his commentary for almost the entire Talmud, but we're lacking that commentary for some tractates, for a handful of tractates. And in tractates Psachim and Bava Batra, we only have the partial commentary. In Bava Batra, Rashi's commentary ends on page 27, thereabouts, and we don't have any evidence of a Rashi commentary beyond that. So Rashbam takes over at that point and becomes the commentator on the Talmud, in a place where his grandfather did not succeed in writing a commentary. In this case, we do have Rashi to chapter 10 of Psachim. He is up here, but as we read in Rashi, we will discover that his commentary to this chapter, unlike his commentary to the first 9 chapters of Tractate Pesachim, his commentary here is rather short. It's abbreviated. It's bare bones. It appears that he didn't have the opportunity to really go about fleshing it out and telling us everything that we would need to know, which he tries to do in his commentaries to other sections of the Talmud. So Rashbam here is a supplement to Rashi, and we'll see that we really need that supplement from time to time to tell us where we need to go. Okay, so let's get started with the text of the Mishnah, which is right there in the column in the middle of the page. Erev Psachim, the big words here. So on the day before the Seder, the 14th of Nisan, Samuch lemincha, close to mincha time, Lo yochal adam ad shetechshach. A person should not eat until it gets dark. All right, so the Mishnah is already giving us a rule that there is a kind of mini fast, if you will, that is expected of us on the afternoon of Erev Pesach. Now, exactly what do we mean by samuch lemincha, close to mincha time? Well, this is the kind of thing we need a commentary for. So let's look at Rashi up in the top left-hand corner. Erev Pesachim samuch lemincha, close to mincha time. How does he explain that? He explains kodem lemincha me'at. He says a little bit before mincha time. Okay, well, that tells us something, because you might have thought that the fast begins a little bit after mincha time. No, Rashi tells us it begins a little bit before mincha time, but he doesn't explain to us what is mincha time, and for that matter, he doesn't explain which mincha, because there is more than one. Perhaps if Rashi had a chance to revise or complete his commentary, he would have given us those details, but instead we're going to have to turn to his grandson, the Rashbam, who's down here in the highlighted section. Let's see what he says. Arvei Psachim and Erev Arvei, it's a common textual difference in this chapter. It means the same thing. On the day before Pesach, Samuch lemincha, close to mincha time, he begins by telling us it is mincha katana. The mincha we're talking about is mincha katana as opposed to mincha gedola. Now, we know the words katana and gedola mean small and large, little and big. And so literally we would be talking about little mincha and big mincha. That's not exactly what it means here. Mincha gedola means mincha when the sun is gedola bashamayim, that is, the sun is high in the sky. Mincha time can begin sometime a little bit after noon, and we'll talk in a minute or so about how noon is measured, how the hours are measured. So anytime in the afternoon, and when the sun is heading down toward sunset, is mincha time. So the closer it is to noon, we call it mincha gedola. But there was another time for mincha, and that was called mincha katana, when the sun is katana b'shamayim. The sun is not high in the sky, it's relatively low in the sky. It is declining to the west and really heading towards sunset. All right, so when Rashbam says mincha katana, he's telling us that the fast is going to begin close to that time, mincha katana. It doesn't start right after noon. It starts in the later afternoon. So, well, that's important. That's significant. We don't have to fast quite so long. Now, remember Rashi told us, kodem lemincha me'at. All right, the fast begins a little bit before mincha. We now know that this mincha is mincha katana, and Rashbam's going to explain. What does that mean? Ma'at. Well, it's chatzi sha'a, a half an hour, betchilat sha'a asirit, at the beginning of the 10th hour of the day. And we know that in ancient times, before people had clocks that were synchronized and all of that, the way they told time, and they knew that the day had 24 hours, what they did was they would divide the daylight time into 12 equal sections. Each one of these sections is called a sha'ah, it's an hour, so that the daylight time, each hour is 1/12 of the day, and you measure time by proportions, right? So the 10th hour of the day, it corresponds to 3 to 4 o'clock on an actual clock. We really are talking about the beginning of the last 1/4 of the daylight period, okay? And from 3 to 3:30, at that if you can think of it proportionally, that's when the fast begins. As Rashbam tells us, we know this because elsewhere in this tractate, we're told Talmid Nishchat. Talmid Nishchat would mean something completely different. The Talmid offering is sacrificed instead of a student being sacrificed. Talmid Nishchat, when was the Talmid, the daily sacrifice, offered? Well, it was slaughtered Bishmona Umechetza. It was slaughtered at 8.5 hours. That would be around 2:30 on the sun clock. V'karev b'tisha umechetza, and it was actually offered at 3:30. That is 30 minutes after the last 1/4 of the day begins. Ninseit, what you've got then, he says, mincha katana, that period of day we call mincha katana, is betet umechetza, at 9.5 hours of the day. Okay, v'samuchle hainu chatzi sha'a kodem besof sha'at shi'it. So when we talk about close to mincha, we're talking about a half an hour before. That is at the beginning, at the end of the ninth hour, and the beginning of the 10th hour. All right. So we're talking about around 3 o'clock on the sun clock is when this fast is supposed to start. That's when you have to stop eating, according to this rule in the Mishnah. Now let's get back to Rashi, because remember the Mishnah said, Lo yochal adam, a person should not eat until it gets dark. Now Rashi's going to take up the question, why is it that we're not supposed to eat? I mean, the day before Pesach is not legislated by the Torah as a fast day. What's the purpose of this abstention from food? And Rashi gives us the reason, Kidei sheyochal matzah shel mitzvah l'te'avon, so that a person should eat the matzah with which they are going to fulfill the mitzvah of the evening, of the Seder evening, achilat matzah, the formal fulfilling of the requirement to eat matzah. You should eat that matzah l'te'avon, which means with appetite, with delight. You should really want to eat that matzah, which is a lot easier to do when you're hungry, since matzah, when you're not hungry, doesn't taste particularly inviting. Starve yourself a little bit so that you really want it. Now, why do you do this? Mishum hidur mitzvah, Rashi says. It's on account of the principle of hidur mitzvah. The principle that says in performing the mitzvot, we should try to do so in a way that makes those mitzvot particularly pleasant, pleasing, desirable, so that they should be chavivin aleinu, that we should really like them and take delight and pleasure in them. A classic example, the mitzvah of lulav on Sukkot. Any lulav will do, but according to the principle of hidur mitzvah, I should try to save up a little money to buy a bigger, nicer lulav, because it'll look more pleasing. That's hidur mitzvah, right? So when we fulfill the mitzvah of matzah, we're not just shoving matzah down our throats. We should really take pleasure in the eating of this matzah, and that's why the rabbis have said in the last 1/4 of the day prior to the Seder starting, you should stop eating. You should stop eating. Well, that's interesting, because now we get to the right-hand margin of the page over here on Tosafot. They're going to ask a question. V'im tomar, which is one of the ways Tosafot raises a question or a kasha. V'im tomar usually means the kasha we're about to raise is not that difficult a difficulty. We have a good answer for this. But the question is, well, umalo yochal, if I'm not supposed to eat on the afternoon leading up to the Seder, what exactly am I not supposed to eat? What is the Mishnah talking about? Matzah. Well, maybe the Mishnah is talking about matzah, that I shouldn't eat matzah on the last 1/4 of the day leading up to the Seder. Well, no, he can't be talking about that, because afilu kodem nami asur. When we're talking about matzah, even before mincha time, all day long on the day before Pesach, you're not supposed to eat matzah at all. Kida amrinan b'Yerushalmi, because it says in Talmud Yerushalmi, Kol ha'ochel matzah be'erev ha'Pesach ki'ilu bo'el arusato b'veit chamiv. A person who eats matzah on the day before Pesach is like one who has sex with their betrothed spouse in their in-laws' house. That is to say, you've performed an action that is not technically illegal. Arusa is somebody with whom one has already performed kiddushin. You're technically married, but you haven't really moved in together. You should wait until we have the chuppah, the shav brachot, and all of that. But you couldn't wait. You jumped the gun. That's not nice. You shouldn't eat matzah, therefore, on the day before Pesach, leading up to the Seder, and that's all day long. So this business about not eating uh, a little bit before mincha time, that can't be referring to matzah because we already have a rule about matzah. So the Tosafot goes on, the Mishnah must be talking about something else that we're not supposed to eat. Well, maybe v'i b'mine targima. If you say maybe the Mishnah is talking about fruits and vegetables, the kind of thing you eat as an appetizer prior to a main course, Amar Gemara, no, the Talmud has said already, and it's going to say on page 107b, Aval mitabel hu b'mine targima. A person is allowed to eat fruits and veggies prior to eating the matzah, prior to the Seder beginning. That's not off limits. So, in fact, the fast that the rabbis are talking about when they say lo yochal adam is not really a fast. You are allowed to eat. But you're not allowed to eat something, right? It says lo yochal. So what are you not allowed to eat? Now the Tosafot come up with an answer, vayesh lomar, and we can say this. The ayare, what this Mishnah is talking about is matzah ashira. It's talking about enriched matzah, the thing we call egg matzah, matzah that is made out of flour and either egg or fruit juice, uh, matzah that you cannot eat at the Seder to fulfill the mitzvah, because to do that, you really need lechem oni, that is matzah that is very plain, not enriched at all, made out of flour and water only. Matzah ashira may not be chametz, and you might be able to have it around, but you can't fulfill the mitzvah with it. So maybe matzah ashira is not prohibited on Erev Pesach, and in fact, the Tosafot says, "Dela asar b'Yerushalmi ella b'matzah haru'uya letzeit ba'chovato." That the Yerushalmi is only talking, when it says don't eat matzah on the day before Pesach, it's only talking about matzah that you can use to fulfill your obligation. It's not talking about this other kind of enriched matzah, and therefore you're permitted to eat that. Aval b'matzah ashira shalya. It is permitted to eat matzah ashira, egg matzah, on the day before Pesach. V'chein haya noheg Rabbeinu Tam. And that's exactly what Rabbeinu Tam used to do. He was one of the leading lights of the Tosafot school, a brother, actually the younger brother of the Rashbam, who wrote his commentary on the other side of the page. Rabbeinu Tam, a great halachic authority in his own right, one of the greatest. And this is what he would do on Erev Pesach. He would eat egg matzah and therefore, but he would not eat it in the late afternoon, right? He would not eat it from mincha time onwards or samuch mincha onwards in order to fulfill this rule of the Mishnah, lo yochal adam. So apparently from the literal meaning of the text, a person should not eat, which seems to mean anything. We've now worked it down to what it means. The only thing it means is egg matzah. That's the only thing this Mishnah comes to prohibit from mincha time onwards. But other than that, fruits, veggies, and things like that, you're allowed to eat. It might be interesting to take a look at what Rambam in his Mishnah Torah does with this detail. And he has something like this, although not exactly what Tosafot says. His halacha is as follows: Asru chachamim le'chol matzah be'erev Pesach. The sages made a prohibition against eating matzah on Erev Pesach, the day before the Seder, kedei shehiyeh heker la'achilata ba'erev, so that when we eat it at night, it should be recognized as something special, something different. You're allowed to eat matzah 365 days a year. There's nothing wrong with eating matzah per se. Why anyone would want to do it the rest of the year is another question, but you're allowed to do it. However, in order to make a distinction, a kind of havdalah between matzah as an ordinary food and matzah as a food of mitzvah, which it is on the night of the Seder, the rabbi said we're going to make a break. And so the day before the Seder, that is on Erev Pesach, you don't eat matzah at all. V'chein asur, likewise, it is forbidden le'echol Erev HaPesach, mikodem hamincha kima'at. On Erev Pesach, it's also forbidden to eat from a little bit before mincha time. Why? Kadesh yikanes la'achilat matzah b'ta'ava, so that when you get to the eating of matzah at the Seder, you should eat it with an appetite, with some degree of desire and pleasure. Aval, okay, so we're not supposed to eat in the afternoon leading up to the Seder. Aval, the Rambam says, ochel hu me'at perot o yirachot. He also reads the Talmud later on in this chapter. He knows that you can eat mine targima. The Gemara allows this. So a person is allowed to eat me'at, that word right there, a little bit, a small amount of fruit and veggies. V'lo yimalei kriso mehen. Don't fill yourself up with that food, right? We do want, there's business about ta'ava. We want to preserve that, and so we don't want to completely destroy our appetite before the Seder, even if we're eating permitted foods. But we can eat those permitted foods. We are allowed to do that. But should we? Well, the Rambam said, look, the hachamim harishonim, down here in the second to last line, the ancient sages, the truly old guys to whom we look up to as great spiritual exemplars, hayu marivin atzman erev Pesach. They used to starve themselves, literally. They used to deny themselves food on erev Pesach, kidei le'achol matzah b'ta'ava, so that they could eat matzah that night at the Seder with an appetite, with pleasure, with delight. V'hiyu mitzvot chavivin alav, so that the mitzvot would be pleasant and delightful to an individual. The idea being, obviously, that when we perform mitzvot, we can do so simply as an action. Okay, the Torah says I've got to do X, I'm going to do X, or the rabbi said I got to do this, I'm going to do it. Or we can perform that mitzvah as something in which we really take pleasure. I really want to do this. This mitzvah actually is pleasing to me. And when we can do that, mishum hidur mitzvah, mishum tava, however we put that, that's kind of what we're doing on the day before Pesach. We're trying to make sure that when we get to the eating of matzah, we really take pleasure in doing it. All right? So that brings us back to the Mishnah. And in the highlighted section, where are we? It says, Afilu ani shebeYisrael lo yochal ad sheyasev. Even a poor Jew, a poor person in Israel, and ani shebeYisrael, we're going to translate as the poorest. That's really what they're talking about. Even the poorest Jew should not eat until that person reclines. Yasev literally means to recline, physically to lean, as the rabbis understand it, to lean to your left side in the way that people used to lean or recline at formal banquets in the Greco-Roman period. And that seems to be the way in which the Mishnah envisages that we will have the Seder. We're all going to be sitting around the room on these little benches or couches, reclining, and eating the foods and telling the story and so forth. Even a poor person should be able to do that, and he should not therefore eat on the night of Pesach without being in a reclining position. Now, why is that? Well, Rashi takes a crack at this up here in the highlighted section. Ani shebeYisrael lo yochal, or afilu ani shebeYisrael lo yochal, b'leil Pesachim. We're talking about the night of Pesach now. We're not talking about the samuch lemincha anymore. We're talking about at the Seder. Don't eat until one reclines. Don't eat unless you recline. Kederech b'nei chorin. What is this reclining about? Well, it's the way free people used to eat their meals, zecher lecherut, and especially on Pesach, where we're remembering our liberation. Reclining is a way of symbolizing our liberation from slavery in Egypt. Now, we talk about free people. What does that mean? Well, for the rabbis, the paradigm of the Ben or Bat Horin was the Roman citizen. These people were not simply, they weren't free merely because they weren't slaves. They were free because they were people of stature and status and culture. They had a position in the community that was something. And this is what they did. This is how they ate their meals. They didn't just sit on the ground and shove food in their mouths. No, they had formal banquets in which they observed various rituals. One of these was reclining. And as Rashi goes on to say, B'mita v'al hashulchan, we recline on a mitah, which does not mean a bed here. They didn't have Seder in their bedrooms. The mitah is the couch, little couch on which a person would recline on their left side and participate in the banquet. Then Rashi says ve'al hashulchan, probably think about his own time. In 11th century France, for that matter, in Babylonia during this period, people did not recline on little benches at formal meals. That was a Hellenistic Greco-Roman thing specific to that culture, that time and place. The rest of us have our formal meals sitting around a table, but we nonetheless recline at certain points during the Seder. That's how the custom has developed as a symbolic recognition of our freedom. So even the poor person is not allowed to eat until he or she reclines. And the reason for all of this might be an insight that we find in Tosafot near the bottom of the page, here in this highlighted section. Va'afilu ani shebiyisrael lo yochal ad sheyasev is the dibur matchil, the beginning phrase. Tosafot says, why is this? Why should the poorest Jew not eat before they recline? Disalka da'atach. You might otherwise have thought, it might have occurred to you to say, da hasibat ani la hashiva hasiba, that when a poor person reclines, we don't count that as, quote, reclining, unquote. It's not a thing for poor people. Why? De'ein lo al ma lahasev. Ve'ein zed derech cherut. Because when you think about it, a lot of poor people have no furniture at all. The poorest person is not going to have one of those fancy couches. He's going to be on the ground. Well, okay, yes, but he still has to recline, even though you might otherwise say this is not ein zed derech cherut. When a poor person reclines, that doesn't remind us of freedom. It just reminds us of how poor this person is because they don't have any furniture on which to recline. No, okay, the poor person has to recline. We might otherwise have thought, as this, it's called Musaf Tosafot. It's kind of a commentary on the Tosafot. Explains v'lo tzarich hasibah. You might have thought that the poor person, because he can't really recline the way people of status have their banquets, you might think, okay, the poor person doesn't have to recline. This is not their mitzvah. Go away. You have your Seder any way you want it. No, kamash malan kuf mem lamed here. That's why the text tells us even the poor person has to recline in order to make sure that the poor are included on an equal basis in the community. We do not exempt them from the mitzvot of the evening merely because they are poor. They are Bnei Yisrael, Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah. They are equal to the rest of us, even though, for all practical purposes, they don't enjoy that kind of equal status because of their poverty. On the night of the Seder, we say, no, they are equal. It's just a way of reminding us they need to be treated as equal. We need to keep that in mind as we consider our social policies, how the community relates to the poor and what we do about their poverty. They are not exempt from this mitzvah merely because they are poor. All right, so that's that detail. Back to the Mishnah. V'lo yifchetu lo, excuse me, ma'arba kosot shel yayin, va'afilu min hatamchui. This first phrase, v'lo yifchetu lo, can be translated in a couple of different ways. We're gonna go with one way for the moment. We're gonna say that lo yifchetu lo simply means he should not have less than. Yifchetu, there should not be less to him than 4 cups of wine. Arba kosot shel yayin. All right, seeing the word yifchetu, pahat, meaning less, as an intransitive verb. The poor person should not have less than 4 cups of wine. Va'afilu min hatamchui, even from the tzedakah or charity plate. Now, what that's about, we have to turn to Rashi here again to explain that. What that means is va'afilu, even if he is from the tamchui. What is that? Well, what that means is even if he is mitpalnes mitamchui shel tzedakah, even if this poor person is supported, gets their parnasa from the tamchui of tzedakah, tamchui, this plate or tray, which is a special tzedakah fund. And what is it? Well, dahainu, i.e., Rashi says, what does that mean? It means ani sheba aniyim, the poorest of the poor. We're talking about people at the very bottom of the scale, because we learn in Tractate Peah, chapter 8, Mishnah 7, mi sheyesh lo mazon shtei seudot, a person who has enough food for 2 meals, lo yitol min tamchui. That person is not allowed to take from the tamchui, because the tamchui is reserved only for the people at the very bottom of the scale. Okay, so those folks at the very bottom, the poorest of the poor, they have got to have 4 cups of wine. Why? Well, I guess for the same reason that they've got to recline. They're citizens of the community that is put together by people who observe the mitzvot. So you're not exempt from the mitzvot merely because you are poor. So this poor person better have 4 cups of wine, cannot claim, oh, I'm too poor for this. I get a pitur, I get an exemption. No, you don't. You still have a chiyuv, you have an obligation to have 4 cups of wine. Well, yeah, but practically speaking, how am I going to get 4 cups of wine? I'm ani sheba aniyim. I'm supported by the tamchui. Well, we have to look to that. For that, we have to look to the Rashbam. Okay, but the Rashbam comes along and gives us a bit of a lesson in grammar here. This phrase v'lo yifchetu lo, which we translated before as he should not have less than, which it could mean, but it could mean other things, and Rashbam wants it to mean something else. He says, Gaba'e tzedakah hamifal nasin et ha'aniyim. Who is the subject of this verb yifchetu? It's not the poor person himself, or it's not the wine that he should not have less than 4 cups of. The subject is the Gaba'e Tzedakah, the charity collectors and distributors, the people who are in charge of supporting the poor. They're the ones who should not give him less than 4 cups of wine. This instruction is directed not to the poor themselves, but to the Gabayim, to the community, acting through the official tzedakah institutions. That's what the Mishnah is saying. And the Rashbam says, I know that that's what this phrase means because we have another Mishnah, again from Tractate Peah, Ein pochtin la'ani ha'over mimakom lamakom. You don't give a mendicant or mendicant beggar, that is a poor person who goes from place to place trying to collect tzedakah, you don't give them less than. In that case, this word pochtin, which we see in our Mishnah as well in a different form, is a transitive verb. And the subject is, well, the members of the community, the Gaba'e Tzedakah, the people in charge of distributing tzedakah. And he says that's what it means here. Alma, therefore, Lishna, the phrase Dila Yifchetu in the Mishnah, that there should not be less than, Gaba'e Tzedakah, that really refers back to the tzedakah collectors. They are the ones who who have the obligation. It's on them to make sure that the poor person has at least enough wine for 4 cups. Now, he says, V'hu hadin nami, it's also true that im lo yitnu lo, that if they don't, for some reason, if the Gabayim don't give the poor person this wine or the money to buy the wine, shetzarich sheyechazer b'chol kocho acharav. He's got to go with all his strength. He's got to yechazer means he goes from door to door if necessary to try to collect enough tzedakah in order to purchase the wine, because again, it's his mitzvah. He's not exempt from the mitzvah. So he has to do it, but Ella Orcha de Milta Nakat, the Mishnah is speaking in the normal run, the normal arrangement of society. Sharagilin litain lo arba kosot. It is the custom, it is the normal practice that the community makes sure that the poor have enough wine to do the mitzvot. Yes, the mitzvah on whom is the mitzvah? It's on the poor person, just like it's incumbent upon all of us as citizens of the covenant, as members of the Brit. The poor person is not exempt, but because they are poor, the real obligation in practical terms is on the community. We have to make sure to facilitate their equality. They're equal members of the community of mitzvot, but we know that they can't observe the mitzvot without help. Therefore, we've got to make sure that we have to make sure that their equality is equality in more than name only, which is a lesson that we could learn in all kinds of ways. Okay, back to the text of the Mishnah. V'lo yifchaltu lo me'al bakasot shel yayin. We've seen this, right? The poor person should not have or should not be given less than 4 cups of wine. What do we mean 4 cups? How do we get this? There are all kinds of explanations for why there are 4 cups of wine at the Passover Seder. There are historical explanations. There are traditional explanations. Perhaps the most familiar traditional explanation is the one that Rashi gives us here. He says, Arba kosot keneged arba'a leshonei geula. They correspond to the 4 expressions of redemption. Lashon means language, in this case, 4 words expressing the idea of redemption. Ha'amurim begalut Mitzrayim, that were said in the Torah's account of the exile and the redemption from Egypt. And Rashi gives these to us. V'hotzeti etchem, v'yitzalti etchem, v'galti etchem, v'lakachti etchem. Where is this? Where are these words? Befarashat va'era. In the Torah, in Exodus chapter 6, at the beginning, near the beginning of Parashat Va'era, is where you find these expressions of redemption. Let's just take a look at what these are. Here are the 2 verses, Exodus chapter 6, verses 6 and 7. And you'll see that highlighted in red are the verbs v'hotzeti, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, and v'lakachti there in verse 7. Each one of these words is an expression of what God is going to do to redeem us. I will free you, I will deliver you, I will redeem you, I will take you. They're all synonyms for God's intent, so each one of them gets a cup of wine. Now, we are hardly the first to have asked the following question: what about as long as we're on Exodus chapter 6, what about going down to verse 8 down here? Because there's another verb. That's not all God's going to do up in verses 6 and 7. In verse 8, God continues telling Moses, Veheveti etchem el haaretz, I will bring you to the land that I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's part of the promise of redemption. Maybe there are 5 Lashonei Geula, okay, instead of 4. Now, you might quibble and say, well, okay, the first 4 up here in verses 6 and 7 have to do with getting us out of Egypt, and this bringing us to the land down in verse 8, that's something else, that's a different Misa, that's a different event. But one could also say, well, wait a minute, it isn't redemption. It isn't real redemption until we get to where we're going. Which is symbolized physically by Eretz Yisrael, perhaps expressed symbolically nowadays at the end of the Seder, Lashana Haba'a Birushalayim Habinuya. Let us celebrate next year in the rebuilt Jerusalem, the Jerusalem of the days of true redemption. Uh, the story isn't complete until we are redeemed. So maybe when God promises that God's going to bring us to the land, that should count as one of the languages of redemption. Maybe we should be drinking 5 cups. Well, wouldn't you know it, there seems to be a kind of machloket over that very issue. We're here, and got to apologize for the size of this, but I wanted to make sure that we got all of these different texts on the page. You see where the cursor is going here, Kuf Yud Chet. This is page 118, so uh, you know, about 19 pages away, 19 and a half pages away from where we started out on 99b. This is 118a. Late in the 10th chapter of Psachim, near the very end of the tractate, you'll see where it says here in the text, Tanu Rabbanan, there is a Baraita, a Tanaitic statement, that says Revi'i, it's talking about the Kos Revi'i, the 4th cup of wine, Gomer alav et ha'halel. Over that cup, you say you finish the Hallel, which you began to recite before dinner time, and you finish reciting it after the Seder, if that's what Gomer Hallel means here, and that's another story. But that's the ritual purpose of the 4th cup. It serves following Birkat Hamazon, which is the 3rd cup. 2nd cup is Birkat Geula, which is the cup we drink after the conclusion of the Magid, the telling of the story of Pesach, and then all the way back, Kos number 1, the 1st cup was the Kiddush, which introduces the festival itself and the Seder. Each one of these cups has a ritual function. This is the ritual function of the 4th cup. Now, up here at the very top of the page, what does Rashi say? Let's see how Rashi has very little to say here. Rashbam has a lot more to say, as is the case throughout this chapter. These little letters here where my cursor is going, if you can read, if you can stick your eye close to the screen, or if not, just take my word for it. We got the Rashi script letters Hey Gimel, which mean Hachi Garcinon. This is the text that we read, or this is how we read the text. Rashi is making a textual emendation. He's working from a text. It's got to be a manuscript. It's the 11th century. We're not printing anything yet. He's got a manuscript of chapter 10 of Psachim, and he doesn't like the text in front of him. There's something wrong with it. So he says, I'm going to give you how the text should read. And it should read, Revi'i gomer alav et halel v'omer alav halel hagadol, which turns out to be exactly what our text says in the middle of the page. What happened, of course, is that the scribes who copied later manuscripts subsequent to Rashi, and let alone the printers who printed the Talmud in the form that we see here, took their cue from Rashi, or from Rashbam, who does exactly the same thing down here. He gives us a Hachi Garcina and tells us, you read this, Rivi'i Gomer Alavat Hallel. They took their cue from these great sages who say this text should read as follows, which is fine. The problem is when our text is corrected, quote unquote, to meet the demands of a Chacham like Rashi, it means that we may not know what version he had in front of him. What was Rashi's original text, the one he doesn't like, the one that's defective or faulty for some reason? This kind of correction might have worked for him, but it causes problems for the rest of us in our day, because we'd like to actually know what was it that was bothering Rashi about that text. Maybe we could find another explanation for that version. We often do not know the version that was in front of Rashi, but we have an idea in this case, because down here in the bottom left-hand corner, the commentary of Rabbeinu Hananel ben Hushiel, this is the Rabbeinu Hananel who lives in the 10th and 11th centuries in North Africa, in Kairouan. Rabbeinu Hananel, an earlier Talmud commentator, preserves a version that is different. And again, you'll have to either squint or take my word for it, but his version of this text reads, Tanu Rabbanan, we have a Baraita, Hamishi, Omer Alav Halel Hagadol. Over the fifth cup, you say Halel Hagadol. It seems that this version of the text we have on the page, Revi'i, which says fourth cup, there was another version that said, no, fifth cup. Very interesting. Now, it could be that this version that says fifth cup, and Rabbeinu Hananel is not the only Rishon or early Talmud commentator to have this. It could be that that version is just wrong. After all, the Mishnah at the very beginning of our chapter, right here, the go back. We have to go all the way back here. The Mishnah says, "Arba'a kosot." It says the poor person and everybody else have to have at least 4 cups of wine. It doesn't mention the fifth cup. Maybe this is just this text of Rabbeinu Hananel is wrong, or perhaps there was a minhag in some communities to add a fifth cup to the 4 cups mentioned in the very first Mishnah. We do know that Rambam in the Mishnah Torah mentions that there is a custom among some people to drink a fifth cup, and he calls that cup rishut. That is, you're allowed to drink a fifth cup. It's not an obligation, a chovah, the way the first 4 cups are, but if you want to drink the fifth cup, you may. It's interesting to speculate whether this possibility of a fifth cup has anything to do with this fifth language of Geula we have in Exodus chapter 6, verse 8. Could it be that some people decided to add a fifth cup to correspond to this language, V'heveti etchem, I will bring you to the land, to symbolize the true final redemption for which we yearn as we celebrate the greatest act of redemption in our past on Seder evening? Maybe it does. Maybe that cup of wine that we set aside for Eliyahu, it could be that that cup originated in some strange way as this kind of fifth voluntary optional cup of wine that we don't have to drink at the Seder, but maybe we are allowed to, and maybe someday we hope we will be required to when that final redemption occurs. So as you look at the cup of Elijah at your Seder, think about that as the optional kos chamishi. Think about it as though it were that extra cup. Do we drink that cup in the hope that redemption, that true final redemption will occur? Do we drink that cup in celebration of the Atchalta de Geula, the beginnings of redemption that we believe our generation has experienced with the establishment of the State of Israel? Or do we not drink that cup because we aren't really ready to drink it until we have finally been brought, Veheveti, the text says, until God has brought us to the place where we are supposed to be going. At any rate, those are the preparations that we make in right before the Seder begins, the preparations described in the first Mishnah of Tractate Psachim, chapter 10, on page 99b. Thanks for learning with us this video shiur from the Freehof Institute of Progressive Halacha.